My ex and her lawyer lover thought they won, until I found Grandpa's hidden millions. My name is Benjamin Carter, but everyone in Seattle's business circles knew me as Ben. At 73 years old, I had spent 5 decades building Carter & Associates, a commercial real estate empire that stretched from Washington State to Northern California. I started with nothing but a briefcase, a tie borrowed from my father, and an unshakable belief that hard work would eventually pay off. It was 1973 when I made my first sale, a small warehouse on the outskirts of Tacoma. The commission was $300, barely enough to cover my rent and groceries for 2 weeks. But that sale taught me something invaluable. People don't buy properties, they buy trust. And I became very good at earning trust. By 1980, I had opened my own office. By 1990, I owned commercial buildings. By 2000, I had expanded into development and property management. My portfolio included shopping centers, office complexes, and mixed-use developments across the Pacific Northwest. Forbes once estimated my net worth at $45 million, though the real number was closer to $63 million when you factored in all the private investments and holdings they couldn't track. But numbers on a spreadsheet were never what drove me. What drove me was building something lasting, something my family could be proud of. I met Diana Whitmore at a charity auction in 1985. She was volunteering at the registration desk, wearing a simple blue dress that somehow outshone every designer gown in the room. Her auburn hair caught the light, and when she smiled, when she smiled, the whole room seemed brighter. I bought a painting I didn't want for $12,000 just to have an excuse to talk to her again at the pickup desk. "You know this painting is hideous, right?" she said with a playful smirk as she processed my paperwork. "Absolutely terrible," I agreed, "but now I have a reason to come back next week and complain about it." She laughed, and 3 months later, I proposed. We married in a small ceremony in the San Juan Islands with 30 guests, most of whom were her family. My parents had passed years before, and I had no siblings. Diana became my entire world. We had 2 children. Oliver arrived first, serious, thoughtful, with his mother's eyes and my stubbornness. 3 years later came Sophia, bright and curious, always asking questions about everything. I worked long hours, often leaving before dawn and returning after dinner, but I never missed a school play, never missed a soccer game, never missed the moments that mattered. When Oliver graduated from Columbia Law School, I stood in the audience with tears streaming down my face. When Sophia received her doctorate in environmental science from Stanford, Diana squeezed my hand and whispered, "You did good, Ben. You did real good." By the time I turned 70, both children had established successful careers. Oliver was a partner at a prestigious Seattle law firm. Sophia worked for a major environmental consulting company. We had given them every opportunity, every advantage. They owed us nothing, and that made me prouder than any business success ever could. Diana and I had everything. We owned 3 properties: our primary residence in Madison Park, a waterfront cabin on Whidbey Island, and a vacation home in Napa Valley. We drove luxury cars, traveled twice a year to Europe, and hosted dinner parties where Seattle's elite gathered to drink wine and talk about markets and politics. Our marriage wasn't perfect. No marriage is. We had our disagreements, our rough patches, the occasional argument about money or time or whose turn it was to remember someone's birthday, but we always found our way back to each other. After 38 years together, I thought we were unbreakable. I was wrong. The first sign came on a Tuesday evening in March. Diana had been meeting with her financial advisor more frequently, or so she said. She'd leave the house dressed impeccably, claiming she had complicated portfolio issues to discuss. At first, I didn't question it. We had always maintained some financial independence, each managing certain accounts while sharing others. But then I noticed she was distracted. We'd be having dinner and she'd be scrolling through her phone with a small smile I didn't recognize. When I asked what was amusing her, she'd quickly lock the screen and say, "Oh, nothing. Just a funny message from Catherine." Catherine was her college roommate, someone she talked to maybe 3 times a year. It didn't add up. One evening, I found a receipt that had fallen from her purse. It was from an expensive Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place where reservations needed to be made weeks in advance. The date was a Thursday, 2 weeks prior, the same Thursday she'd told me she was at her book club. "Diana," I said carefully that night, showing her the receipt, "can you explain this?" She barely glanced at it. "Oh, that. Catherine was in town unexpectedly. We had lunch. The receipt is from 8 p.m. Dinner then." "Why are you interrogating me, Ben? Are you really so insecure that I can't have dinner with an old friend?" The way she said it, with just enough indignation to make me feel guilty, should have been my warning. But after 38 years of trusting someone, you don't just flip a switch. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You tell yourself you're being paranoid. The meetings continued. Then came the weekend trip to Portland. "Girls' weekend," she called it. Just me, Catherine, and a few others. You know how we used to do these in college. We're not getting any younger, Ben. I kissed her goodbye on Friday morning and wished her a wonderful time. She left with a small suitcase, and what What I now recognized was excitement in her eyes, not for a weekend with girlfriends, but for something else entirely. Oliver called me that Saturday afternoon. "Dad, I saw Mom in Seattle yesterday." My blood went cold. "That's impossible. She's in Portland." "I'm telling you, I saw her. She was having lunch at Canlis with some guy. I called out to her, but she didn't hear me. When I got closer, she and the guy had already left, but Dad, I'm certain it was her." I thanked Oliver and hung up. My hands were shaking. I called Diana's phone 4 times. Each call went to voicemail. She texted back 2 hours later. "At a spa, phone in locker, having amazing time, love you." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in our bed, the same bed we'd shared for decades, staring at the ceiling and feeling something I'd never felt in our marriage. Doubt. Deep, gnawing, terrible doubt. When Diana returned Sunday evening, she was glowing. "Best weekend ever," she announced, dropping her bag in the foyer. "We should do this every year." "Oliver saw you," I said quietly. She froze. For just a second, maybe half a second, her expression shifted. Then the mask was back. "What?" "Oliver saw you in Seattle, on Saturday, at Canlis, with a man." She laughed. "Ben, honey, you're confused. I was in Portland all weekend. Oliver must have seen someone who looked like me. He was certain. Then he was certainly wrong." She walked to me and kissed my cheek. Her perfume, a new scent I didn't recognize, lingering in the air. "I'm exhausted. I'm going to take a bath." She disappeared upstairs and I sat in the living room, my mind racing. Someone who looked like her, at Canlis, on the same day she was supposed to be in Portland. The next morning, I did something I'd never done in our entire marriage. I hired a private investigator. His name was Marcus Webb, a former Seattle PD detective who now ran his own firm. His office was in a modest building in Capitol Hill. Nothing fancy, just a desk, 2 chairs, and file cabinets lining the walls. "I need to know if my wife is having an affair," I told him bluntly. Marcus didn't judge, didn't offer platitudes. He just pulled out a yellow legal pad and started taking notes. "Tell me everything that's made you suspicious." I laid it all out. The meetings, the Portland trip, Oliver's sighting, the changed behavior. Marcus listened carefully, occasionally jotting something down. "I'll need some information," he said when I finished. "Her phone number, usual locations, vehicle details, photograph if you have one." I provided everything he needed, writing a check for his retainer. "How long will this take?" "Usually 2 to 3 weeks to establish patterns. If there's something to find, I'll find it." I left his office feeling like a traitor. Investigating my own wife felt like a violation of everything we'd built together. But something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones, and I needed to know the truth. Marcus called me 12 days later. "Mr. Carter, we need to meet, not at my office, somewhere private." We met at a small coffee shop in Fremont. Marcus arrived with a manila envelope that looked heavy with contents. He ordered black coffee. I ordered nothing. My stomach was in knots. "I'm sorry," he said as he slid the envelope across the table, "but you were right." Inside were photographs. Diana entering a luxury condominium in Bellevue. Diana leaving the same condo hours later. Diana with a man, younger, maybe 50, athletic build, expensive suit. Diana kissing this man in his car. Diana holding his hand as they walked through a park. "Who is he?" My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "David Preston, age 51, partner at Thornton & Associates, a wealth management firm downtown. Divorced, no children. He's her financial advisor." The irony would have been funny if it wasn't destroying my life. Financial advisor. All those meetings. All those late nights discussing her portfolio. "How long?" I asked. "Based on credit card records and surveillance patterns, at least 14 months, maybe longer." 14 months, over a year, while I was working to maintain our lifestyle, to ensure our retirement was secure, to build something for our children. My wife was sleeping with her financial advisor. Marcus kept talking, showing me more photos, timeline charts, receipts for hotel rooms and dinners, but I'd stopped listening. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable. Diana wasn't just having an affair, she was living a double life. "There's something else," Marcus said carefully. "I've noticed some unusual activity." I looked up from the photographs. "What kind of activity?" "Your wife and Mr. Preston have had multiple meetings with an attorney, Timothy Garrett. He specializes in complex divorce cases." The world tilted. "Divorce?" Marcus nodded grimly. "They're planning something, Mr. Carter. I don't know exactly what, but I'd strongly recommend you secure your own legal counsel immediately." I drove home in a daze. The Seattle skyline, usually so beautiful, looked gray and hostile. I thought about confronting Diana immediately, throwing the photos on the dining room table and demanding an explanation. But something stopped me. If they were planning a divorce, if they were meeting with attorneys, then this wasn't just an affair. This was a strategy, an attack, and I needed to be prepared. That evening, Diana was cheerful at dinner, talking about a new yoga class she'd started attending. I nodded and smiled and pretended everything was normal, all while the manila envelope burned in my briefcase upstairs. I hired an attorney the next morning. Not just any attorney, the best divorce lawyer in Seattle, a woman named Patricia Montgomery who had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in protecting her clients' assets. "Tell me everything," she said in our first meeting, her sharp eyes assessing me from across an enormous mahogany desk. I told her about the affair, showed her Marcus's evidence, explained my concerns about Diana's meetings with Timothy Garrett. Patricia reviewed everything carefully. When she finished, she looked up with an expression that sent chills down my spine. Mr. Carter, we have a serious problem. Timothy Garrett isn't just any divorce attorney. He's known for one thing: destroying wealthy husbands in court. He doesn't just take assets, he annihilates reputations. And if your wife has been meeting with him for months, they've been building a case against you. But I haven't done anything wrong. That won't matter, Patricia said bluntly. In divorce court, truth is malleable. Timothy will construct a narrative where you're the villain, controlling, emotionally abusive, financially manipulative. He'll find witnesses. He'll twist innocent situations into evidence of wrongdoing. By the time he's done, you'll barely recognize yourself in his version of events. So what do I do? Patricia leaned back in her chair. We prepare for war, because that's what this is going to be. Diana filed for divorce on a Thursday morning in November. I was in a meeting with potential investors when my phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line read, "Legal notice, dissolution of marriage." I excused myself and opened the attachment. My hands shook as I read the petition. Diana wasn't just asking for a divorce. She was asking for everything. The petition claimed I had been emotionally abusive throughout our marriage, controlling her finances, isolating her from friends and family, and creating an environment of psychological terror. She requested full ownership of all 3 properties, claiming they were safe spaces she needed to escape my tyrannical behavior. She wanted both cars, all bank accounts, and alimony of $20,000 per month. But the worst part, the part that made my blood run cold, was the request for our adult children to undergo family therapy to address the trauma I had allegedly caused them. Oliver and Sophia were 35 and 32 years old, respectively. They were grown adults with their own lives. Yet Diana was dragging them into this, painting me as a monster who had damaged them. I called Patricia immediately. "Did you see it?" "I'm reading it now," she replied, her voice tense. "This is worse than I expected. Timothy has constructed an entire false narrative. We need to respond strategically. What about my children? She's involving them." "That's intentional, Ben. She's creating a scenario where they have to choose sides. It's psychological warfare." That evening, I tried calling both Oliver and Sophia. Oliver answered, but his voice was cold. "Dad, I need some time to process this." "Process what?" "You know these allegations aren't true. I don't know what to believe anymore. Mom showed us some things. Texts. Emails. She seems really hurt, Dad." "What texts? What emails?" "Oliver, I can't talk about this right now. I'll call you when I'm ready." He hung up. Sophia didn't answer at all. I sat in my study, surrounded by photos of our family. Every smiling face now felt like a lie. How had Diana done this? How had she turned our children against me so quickly? The answer came 3 days later when Marcus delivered another envelope. Inside were fabricated text message screenshots, supposedly from my phone, where I said terrible things about Diana. The messages called her stupid, useless, a burden. They threatened her, controlled her, demanded she account for every penny she spent. None of it was real, but the forgeries were excellent. Someone with technical skill had created these fake conversations, backdated them, and made them look authentic. "Who did this?" I asked Marcus. "I'm guessing David Preston has connections," Marcus replied. "The financial world has access to tech experts who can create convincing digital evidence. I'm working on proving these are fake, but it'll take time." Time was something I didn't have. The court date was set for January, only 6 weeks away. Patricia filed our response denying all allegations and providing counter-evidence of Diana's affair, but Timothy Garrett was a master at his craft. For every piece of evidence we presented, he had an explanation. "Yes, my client was seeing Mr. Preston," his response brief stated, "but only because she was desperate for emotional support after years of abuse. This relationship began after the marriage had already deteriorated due to Mr. Carter's behavior. It was brilliant legal maneuvering and completely false. The holidays were a nightmare. Thanksgiving came and went without a single call from my children. Christmas was worse. I spent it alone in the Madison Park house, looking at decorations I'd put up out of habit, knowing no one was coming. Diana, meanwhile, was playing the victim perfectly. She gave an interview to a local lifestyle magazine, somehow framing it as a story about finding yourself after trauma, where she talked about rebuilding her life after leaving a difficult relationship. She never mentioned my name, but anyone who knew us understood exactly who she was talking about. The article included a photo of her and David Preston at a charity event, described as her supportive friend who helped her through a dark time. The comment section filled with supportive messages from people who didn't know the truth, all praising her courage. I wanted to scream. I wanted to take out full-page ads with Marcus's evidence, showing the world what she really was. But Patricia advised against it. "You'll look vindictive and controlling, exactly what they're accusing you of. We fight this in court, not in public opinion." The preliminary hearing arrived in early January. I wore my best suit and walked into King County Superior Court with Patricia at my side. The courtroom was modern, all light wood and large windows, but it felt oppressive. Diana Diana sat on the other side with Timothy Garrett, wearing a simple black dress and minimal makeup, looking vulnerable and sad. When our eyes met, she didn't look away. She just stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. The judge was Harold Norton, a 60-year-old man with a reputation for fairness. I clung to that reputation like a lifeline. Timothy Garrett spoke first, and he was devastating. He painted a picture of Diana as a trapped woman who had endured decades of psychological abuse, controlling behavior, and financial manipulation. He presented the fake text messages as evidence. He called witnesses, people I barely knew, who testified they'd seen me be dismissive or cold toward Diana at social gatherings. One neighbor claimed she'd heard shouting from our house on multiple occasions. Another said I'd once prevented Diana from attending a friend's birthday party. Every anecdote was either a complete lie or a twisted version of innocent events. When it was our turn, Patricia methodically dismantled each claim. She showed phone records proving I was out of town during some of the alleged incidents. She presented character witnesses, business colleagues, friends, even our former housekeeper, who testified to my respectful treatment of Diana. But the most damaging moment came when Patricia introduced Marcus's evidence of Diana's affair. Photos of Diana and David Preston, timeline documentation, credit card receipts for hotel rooms. Timothy barely blinked. Your Honor, as I stated in our briefs, my client sought emotional comfort from Mr. Preston only after her marriage had become unbearable. The timeline of this relationship is irrelevant to the core issue, Mr. Carter's abusive behavior. Judge Norton reviewed the evidence carefully. After 2 hours of testimony, he called for a recess until the following week. I need time to review all materials, he said. This is a complex case with serious allegations. We'll reconvene next Tuesday for my preliminary ruling. I left the courthouse feeling hollow. Patricia tried to sound optimistic, but I could see the concern in her eyes. The fake messages are a problem, she admitted as we walked to her car. They look authentic, and proving they're fabricated will be difficult without a forensic expert. Then get a forensic expert. I already have one, but Timothy will have his own, and it'll become a battle of experts. Judges hate that. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the hearing, seeing Diana's sad face, hearing the lies spoken as if they were truth. How had my life become this? How had 38 years of marriage culminated in me being painted as a monster in a courtroom? Tuesday arrived with gray skies and rain, appropriate weather for what was to come. We reconvened in Judge Norton's courtroom, and I knew immediately something was wrong. The judge's expression was stern, and he avoided making eye contact with me. After careful review of all evidence and testimony, Judge Norton began, I'm making the following preliminary determinations pending the final hearing. My heart raced. First, I find sufficient evidence to suggest there may have been controlling behavior in this marriage. The text messages, while disputed, present a concerning pattern. No. Second, I'm ordering temporary custody of all marital properties to Mrs. Carter, as she claims to need safe housing away from Mr. Carter. The room spun. Third, I'm freezing all joint bank accounts pending full asset evaluation. Both parties will receive equal access to funds for basic living expenses. Patricia stood immediately. Your Honor, this is premature. We have evidence. Ms. Montgomery, I've reviewed your evidence. My preliminary ruling stands. We'll reconvene in 60 days for the final hearing, at which point I'll make permanent determinations. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck. Just like that, I'd lost my homes. Diana had won the first round, and she knew it. As she left the courtroom with Timothy and David Preston, who had apparently felt bold enough to attend, she glanced back at me, and she smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile or an apologetic one. It was the smile of someone who had just won exactly what they wanted. Within a week, I was out of the Madison Park house. Diana had the locks changed immediately after the preliminary hearing, citing the judge's order. Patricia argued it was an overreach, but Judge Norton upheld it. Mrs. Carter requires a safe space, and the court has granted her temporary custody of the primary residence, was his written response to our motion. I moved into a small extended stay hotel in Ballard, the kind of place with thin walls and a kitchenette that smelled like old grease. It was $45 a night, cheap by Seattle standards, but my funds were limited. The frozen bank accounts meant I had access to only a small portion of our money. Patricia had warned me this might happen. Preliminary rulings favor the person claiming abuse. It's about protecting potential victims. The problem is, the system can be manipulated. This isn't manipulation, I said bitterly. This is theft. The Whidbey Island cabin and Napa vacation home were both placed under Diana's temporary control as well. My entire real estate portfolio, built over 50 years, was suddenly off limits to me. The cars went next. Diana kept the Mercedes and the BMW. I was left with the old pickup truck I used for property visits, a 2008 Ford F-150 with 180,000 miles, and a check engine light that had been on for 3 years. Business suffered immediately. Word spread fast in Seattle's commercial real estate world. Ben Carter's getting getting divorced. Messy situation, abuse allegations, better stay away until it settles. Deals fell through. Partners became distant. One colleague I'd worked with for 20 years actually crossed the street to avoid speaking to me. Carter and Associates began hemorrhaging clients. Property management contracts were canceled. Development partnerships dissolved. By February, my company's revenue had dropped 70%. I tried calling Oliver and Sophia every day. Sophia never answered. Oliver answered once just to say, "Dad, Mom showed us everything. The texts, the way you spoke to her. We need space." "Those texts are fake," I pleaded. "You have to know I would never." They look pretty real to me. And honestly, looking back, I can see patterns. The way you always controlled the finances. The way you made decisions without consulting her. That's called being a husband in a long marriage. We made decisions together. That's not how Mom remembers it. "I'm sorry, Dad. I can't talk about this anymore." He hung up. That was January. By March, 3 months had passed without a word from either of my children. Diana, meanwhile, was thriving. I know because I saw the social media posts. You can't help but look, even when it hurts. She and David Preston were now openly together, posting photos from expensive restaurants, weekend getaways to wine country, evenings at the symphony. One photo particularly gutted me. Diana, Oliver, Sophia, and David, all together at some upscale restaurant, all smiling. My children had replaced me with my wife's lover, and they looked happy about it. The final hearing was scheduled for April 15th, 4 months after the preliminary ruling. 4 months of living in that hotel room, watching my life crumble, seeing my reputation destroyed. Patricia worked tirelessly to build our case. The forensic expert had confirmed the text messages were fabricated. The metadata was wrong. The encryption patterns didn't match my phone's signature. But Timothy Garrett had his own expert who claimed the messages were authentic, and any discrepancies were due to normal digital anomalies. It's going to come down to who the judge believes, Patricia told me a week before the final hearing. The evidence is contradictory enough that Judge Norton will have to make a judgment call. Based on what? She hesitated. Based on who seems more credible? I understood what she wasn't saying. Diana, with her tears and vulnerability, seemed more credible than me, the wealthy businessman accused of abuse. The final hearing lasted 2 days. It was excruciating. Timothy paraded witness after witness, all telling stories of my alleged controlling behavior. Some were true events twisted beyond recognition. Others were complete fiction. A former business partner claimed I'd once threatened to ruin him financially during a disagreement. A blatant lie. Our former housekeeper, who we'd employed for 15 years, testified that she'd seen me belittle Diana. Another lie, though I suspected Diana had paid her well for the testimony. Even Diana took the stand, crying as she described a marriage of constant fear and emotional abuse. She was convincing. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed her myself. Patricia's cross-examination was sharp. She pointed out inconsistencies in Diana's timeline, highlighted the convenient timing of her relationship with David Preston, and presented evidence of Diana's lavish spending in the months since we'd separated. Hardly the behavior of someone traumatized and afraid, but Timothy was prepared for everything. He had explanations, counter-evidence, alternative interpretations. The man was a magician, making lies look like truth and truth look like lies. On the second day, Judge Norton called for final arguments. Timothy spoke for an hour, his voice passionate and righteous as he painted me as a villain and Diana as a survivor. Patricia's response was clinical and fact-based, methodically dismantling each allegation, but I could see in Judge Norton's eyes that he'd already made up his mind. The judge took a 30-minute recess, then returned with his verdict. "This has been one of the most complex cases I've handled," he began. "Both parties have presented compelling evidence. However, I must rule based on the preponderance of evidence and my assessment of credibility. Here it comes," I thought. "I find that Mrs. Carter's testimony regarding emotional abuse is more credible than Mr. Carter's denials." The room tilted. "Therefore, I am ruling in favor of Mrs. Carter on the following points. First, she will retain ownership of all 3 residential properties as they represent safe spaces essential to her recovery from this traumatic marriage." I couldn't breathe. Second, all vehicles will remain in Mrs. Carter's possession. Patricia gripped my arm. Third, all bank accounts and investment portfolios, currently valued at approximately $63 million, will be divided with Mrs. Carter receiving 75% as compensation for years of emotional suffering. The math hit me like a freight train. 75% of $63 million was $47 million. I was being left with roughly $16 million, and that was before taxes and legal fees. Fourth, Mr. Carter will pay spousal support of $15,000 per month for a period of 10 years. Finally, while I cannot order adult children to undergo therapy, I strongly recommend that Oliver and Sophia Carter seek counseling to address family dynamics stemming from this marriage. Judge Norton looked directly at me for the first time. "Mr. Carter, I hope you use the this opportunity to reflect on your behavior and seek help. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck. It was over. I sat motionless as the courtroom emptied. Patricia was talking, something about appeals, about unfair rulings, about fighting this, but I heard nothing. Just a ringing in my ears that wouldn't stop. $47 million? 3 houses, both cars, my children's respect, my reputation, my life gone. Diana walked past with Timothy and David, and once again she looked at me. But this time, she didn't smile. She just looked satisfied, like someone who'd finished a difficult task. I left the courthouse in a daze. Seattle was sunny, cruelly, inappropriately sunny. People walked past me laughing, living their lives, completely unaware that mine had just ended. Patricia drove me back to my hotel. Ben, we can appeal this. Judge Norton made several questionable rulings. We have grounds. No, I said quietly. Ben, no more. I'm done fighting. I lost. She won. Patricia parked outside the hotel. If you don't appeal, this ruling becomes permanent. Everything you built over 50 years is gone. I understand, but I can't do this anymore. I can't spend another year in courtrooms listening to lies about me. I can't watch my children side with her while I'm painted as a monster. I'm 73 years old, Patricia. I'm tired. She looked at me with something like pity. What will you do? I honestly didn't know. Figure out how to survive, I guess. That night, I sat in my hotel room with $16 million in assets that I'd have to liquidate to pay legal fees, taxes, and Diana's settlement. After everything was settled, I'd probably have $8 or $9 million left. It sounds like a fortune, but for a man who'd once been worth $63 million, who'd owned 3 beautiful homes and had a family who loved him, it felt like nothing. I spent the next 3 weeks moving out of the hotel and into a modest apartment in Lake City. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a small balcony overlooking a parking lot. It cost $1,500 a month, less than 1/100th of what my mortgage on the Madison Park house had been. Oliver and Sophia didn't call to see where I was living. They didn't call at all. Diana moved David Preston into the Madison Park house within a month of the final ruling. I saw photos on social media. They'd redecorated, removing all traces of my presence, making it theirs. My former colleagues stopped calling entirely. Carter and Associates collapsed completely, without properties to manage, and with my reputation destroyed, there was no business left. I closed the company in May, laying off the 3 remaining employees who'd stuck with me until the end. By June, I was completely isolated. No family, no friends, no business, no purpose. Just a 73-year-old man living alone in a small apartment, wondering how his life had gone so catastrophically wrong. I found it in July while going through old boxes I'd retrieved from storage. Most of it was junk. Old tax documents, business contracts from decades ago, photographs I couldn't bear to look at. But at the bottom of one box, wrapped in a faded purple cloth, was a small tin that had belonged to my Uncle William. Uncle William had died when I was 25, long before I'd built my business, long before I'd met Diana. He'd been my father's younger brother, a quiet man who'd worked as an accountant for Boeing and lived in a modest house in Renton. He'd never married, never had children. When he died, he left me a few personal items, some books, his watch, and this tin. I'd packed it away and forgotten about it for 48 years. I opened the tin. Inside were old photographs of family members I barely remembered, a couple of war medals from his service in Korea, and a small leather-bound ledger. The ledger was filled with handwritten entries in Uncle William's careful script. Most were mundane, grocery expenses, utility payments, car repairs, but on the last page, there was a single entry that made my heart skip. Evergreen Savings and Trust, account number 874563, opened March 1958, initial deposit $127.50 for Benjamin when he needs it. I stared at the entry. March 1958 was 65 years ago. Uncle William had opened an account in my name when I was 8 years old and I'd never known about it. The account was probably closed or inactive. Even if it wasn't, what would be in there? $127 plus 65 years of minimal interest, maybe a few thousand at most, but I had nothing else to do, nowhere to be, no one waiting for me. The next morning, I drove to the nearest branch of Evergreen Savings and Trust, or what it had become after several mergers and acquisitions. It was now part of Pacific Northwest Financial, a regional bank with branches throughout Washington state. I walked in wearing jeans and a casual shirt carrying the old ledger. The branch was busy with the usual Wednesday morning crowd. I waited in line behind a young couple opening a joint account, and an elderly woman depositing what looked like her Social Security check. When my turn came, I approached a teller who couldn't have been more than 23. "Hi," I said, feeling suddenly foolish. "This is going to sound strange, but I have an old account number. I'm trying to find out if the account still exists." The young teller smiled politely. "Of course, do you have the account number?" I read it from the ledger, 874563. She typed it into her computer, then frowned. This is a really old account number. The format is from before we digitized everything. Let me get my manager." She disappeared into a back office. I waited, expecting her to return and tell me the account was closed decades ago. Instead, a middle-aged man in a suit appeared, looking confused. "Mr. Carter, is it?" "Yes. I'm Raymond Fuller, branch manager. Can you come to my office, please?" There was something in his tone, urgency mixed with bewilderment environment that made my pulse quicken. His office was small and utilitarian, with a desk covered in neat stacks of paper and a computer that looked several years old. Raymond closed the door and gestured for me to sit. "Mr. Carter, this account," he trailed off, typing rapidly on his computer. "Do you have any identification? I need to verify your identity." I handed him my driver's license. He checked it carefully, then returned to his computer. "And you say your uncle opened this account?" "Yes, William Carter. He died in 1976. Raymond nodded slowly, still staring at his screen. "Mr. Carter, this account is active. It's been generating compound interest since 1958. My heart began to race. "How much is in it?" Raymond turned his screen toward me, and I saw a number that didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. 89,347,562 or an 18. I blinked. The number didn't change. That can't be right." Raymond nodded grimly. "I've checked 3 times. Your uncle deposited $127.50 in March 1958. The account was opened with a special long-term interest rate that was common back then, 4.8% compounded annually. Over 65 years." He gestured at the screen. I couldn't speak, couldn't think. $89 million. "Mr. Carter, are you all right?" I stood abruptly, knocking my chair backward. My vision blurred. My hands shook. I need air." Raymond rushed around his desk. "Please sit down. I'll get you some water." He helped me back into the chair and disappeared. I stared at the screen at that impossible number while my entire reality reconstructed itself. $89 million, hidden in a forgotten account for 65 years. While I'd built a business, raised a family, lost everything in a divorce, this money had been sitting there, silently multiplying, waiting. Raymond returned with water and a concerned expression. "Mr. Carter, I know this is shocking. It's not every day someone discovers this kind of surprise. Why wasn't I contacted? The account had no contact information updated after your uncle's death. It was flagged as inactive but not closed. Our policy in the 1950s was to keep accounts open indefinitely as long as there was a balance. Over the decades, as we merged with other banks and digitized records, this account fell through the cracks. It's been accruing interest completely untouched for 65 years. I drank the water, trying to steady myself. "What happens now?" "Well, we'll need to verify your relationship to William Carter and process quite a bit of paperwork. For an account of this size, we'll need to involve our legal and compliance teams. But Mr. Carter," he smiled genuinely for the first time, "this money is yours. It may take a few weeks to fully transfer, but it's absolutely yours." I thanked him and left the bank in a daze. I sat in my old pickup truck in the parking lot for 20 minutes, just breathing. $89 million. Diana had taken almost everything I'd built over 50 years. Judge Norton had ruled I deserved to lose it all. My children had abandoned me. My friends had disappeared, but they didn't know about this. No one knew about this. And suddenly, impossibly, I was wealthier than I'd ever been. Even at the peak of my success, I started laughing. Sitting in that parking lot in my beat-up truck, I laughed until tears streamed down my face. Not tears of joy exactly, but tears of profound cosmic irony. The universe had a sense of humor after all. I didn't tell anyone. Not Patricia, not Marcus, not the few distant acquaintances who still occasionally checked on me. The money stayed in that account while Raymond Fuller and his legal team processed the paperwork to verify my ownership. It took 6 weeks. 6 weeks during which I lived in my small apartment, drove my old truck, and existed in the same quiet anonymity I'd inhabited since the divorce. But everything had changed. I saw the world differently now. When I walked through Pike Place Market and saw wealthy people in expensive clothes, I knew I could buy and sell most of them. When I passed my old Madison Park house and saw Diana's Mercedes in the driveway, I knew I was wealthier than she and David Preston combined. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something else. Clarity. Uncle William's ledger had included something I'd almost missed. A letter tucked into the back cover, written in his careful handwriting. "Dear Benjamin," it read, "if you're reading this, you've found what I left for you. Money is a tool, nothing more. But it's a powerful tool, especially in dark times. I learned late in life that the people who love you shouldn't love you for what you have. They should love you for who you are. If you ever doubt who really cares, this account will show you the truth. Use it wisely. Use it carefully. And remember, wealth is not what you show the world. It's what you keep hidden until the moment it's truly needed. Your Uncle William." I read that letter every night. Uncle William had understood something I'd forgotten during my years of success. True security comes from what others don't know you have. In mid-August, Raymond called. "Mr. Carter, all the paperwork is finalized. The account is ready to transfer. How would you like to proceed?" "Keep it where it is," I said. "I'd like to open a new account at your bank, something completely separate. Transfer only what I need to live comfortably, say $500,000. Keep the rest in the original account." "That's very prudent," Raymond agreed. "Though I should mention, for an account that large, you might want to consider investment management, diversification." "Not yet. Right now I just need to think." The $500,000 transferred into a new checking account under my name. I continued living in my Lake City apartment, driving my old truck, maintaining the same modest existence, but I began to plan. Diana and David Preston thought they'd Grade 1 everything. Judge Norton thought justice had been served. My children thought I was a defeated old man who'd gotten what he deserved. They were all about to learn otherwise. I started with research. I hired Marcus Webb again, but this time not to investigate Diana. I needed to know everything about David Preston. Marcus delivered his report 3 weeks later. "This guy's interesting," he said, spreading documents across my small kitchen table. "David Preston, age 51, partner at Thornton & Associates, manages about $2 billion in client assets. But here's what's interesting. He's had 3 divorces and each one followed the same pattern." "What pattern?" "He targets wealthy married women who are clients, starts an affair, encourages them to divorce, helps them maximize their settlements using his financial expertise, and then moves on when the money's secured. Your wife is actually his 4th conquest, not his 1st. I stared at the documents. Diana doesn't know this. Marcus shrugged. Maybe she does and doesn't care. Or maybe she's so convinced he loves her that she's ignoring the signs. Either way, their relationship has a shelf life. And Timothy Garrett, the lawyer, he and Preston have worked together on at least 6 cases. It's a system. Preston identifies targets. Garrett handles the legal destruction. They split a percentage of the settlement. My blood ran cold. They split a percentage of my money? Marcus nodded. It's not technically illegal since Preston's fee is for financial services and Garrett's is for legal services. But yeah, they've profited from every divorce they've orchestrated together. I had my answer. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a business. Next, I needed to understand my children's situation. It took some digging, but I eventually learned that Oliver was struggling financially. His law firm had passed him over for senior partner, and he'd made some poor real estate investments that had lost money. He was living beyond his means, trying to maintain a lifestyle his income couldn't support. Sophia was doing better, but her environmental consulting company had lost a major contract, and she was worried about layoffs. Diana had promised them both financial help once the divorce settlement cleared. She was using my money to buy their loyalty. I could have felt angry. Instead, I felt something else. Compassion. My children weren't evil. They were human. They'd been manipulated by their mother, fed lies, and enticed with financial security during uncertain times. They'd made the wrong choice, but maybe, they could still make it right. In September, I made my first move. I contacted a different attorney, not Patricia. His name was Graham Sutherland, and he specialized in fraud cases. I showed him all of Marcus's evidence, the pattern of Preston and Garrett working together, the percentage splits, the previous victims. "This is a RICO case waiting to happen," Graham said, his eyes lighting up. "Racketeering, fraud, conspiracy. If we can prove they've been systematically targeting and defrauding wealthy individuals, they could face criminal charges. How long will it take to build a case? 6 months, maybe more. We need to contact their previous victims, gather financial records, establish the pattern. But Mr. Carter, if we do this, it won't just be about your divorce. We'll be taking down their entire operation." "Good," I said. "Let's do it." While Graham worked on the legal case, I made my second move. Oliver's real estate investment was in a commercial property in Tacoma, a small office building he'd purchased with 2 partners. The investment was underwater. They'd overpaid and couldn't find tenants. Oliver stood to lose about $300,000, money he'd borrowed against his home. I created a shell company, Cascade Holdings LLC, and made an offer on the property through an intermediary. Fair market value, quick closing, all cash. Oliver's partners accepted immediately. Oliver called me 2 days later, the first time we'd spoken in 6 months. "Dad, Oliver, it's good to hear your voice." There was a long pause. "Look, I'm calling because something weird happened. That bad investment I made, someone just bought us out at full price. I'm going to break even instead of losing everything." "That's wonderful news." "Yeah, but it feels too lucky, too convenient. I don't suppose you know anything about it." I could have lied, should have lied maybe, but I was tired of lies. "I know everything about it, Oliver. I'm the buyer." Silence. "Then, why?" "Because you're my son, and even though you haven't spoken to me in 6 months, even though you sided with your mother, even though you believed the worst about me, you're still my son, and I couldn't watch you lose everything." His voice cracked. "Dad, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. But Oliver, I need you to know something. Everything your mother said about me, everything in that divorce trial, it was lies. All of it. And someday, probably soon, the truth is going to come out. When it does, I hope you'll listen. I need to go." He hung up, but I'd planted a seed. 2 weeks later, I did the same for Sophia. Her consulting company needed a contract to avoid layoffs. Through another shell company, this time called Northwest Environmental Solutions, I hired her firm for a year-long project assessing commercial properties for environmental compliance. It was legitimate work, but at a rate far above market value. Sophia didn't call me, but she did send a text. "I don't know if this is you, but if it is, thank you. It wasn't much, but it was something." October arrived with the changing leaves and cooler weather. Graham called with an update on the RICO case. "We've contacted 8 of Preston and Garrett's previous victims victims. 5 are willing to testify. We have financial records showing suspicious payment patterns. The DA's office is interested. They see this as a high-profile case that could make careers. When can we move forward? January, maybe February. We need everything airtight. These guys have resources and will fight hard. But Mr. Carter, I'm confident we can win. I thanked him and hung up. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I drove past the Madison Park house. It was early evening and lights glowed in the windows. Through the large front window, I could see Diana and David in the living room, the same living room where I'd celebrated birthdays and holidays and quiet Sunday mornings. They looked happy, comfortable, secure in their victory. I didn't feel anger watching them. I felt pity because they had no idea what was coming. November came, then December. The holidays passed quietly. I spent Christmas alone again, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt like preparation. On January 15th, Graham called. It's time. The DA is issuing arrest warrants tomorrow morning. They're going to hit Preston and Garrett simultaneously at their offices. It'll be public, it'll be loud, and it'll be on the news. And Diana? She's not being charged yet. The DA doesn't have enough evidence she was directly involved in the broader scheme. But as Preston's girlfriend who directly benefited from your divorce, she'll be called as a witness. And Mr. Carter, when this hits the news, when people understand what Preston and Garrett were doing, your divorce will be viewed very differently. I nodded, even though Graham couldn't see me. Thank you. One more thing. I'd recommend you prepare yourself for media attention. This is going to be a big story. Divorce lawyer and financial advisor run multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. That's front page news. I understand. I hung up and looked around my small apartment. Tomorrow, everything would change again. But this time, I was ready. The arrests happened at 9 a.m. on January 16th. I watched the news coverage from my apartment, coffee in hand, as cameras showed federal agents entering Thornton and Associates and Timothy Garrett's downtown law office simultaneously. David Preston was led out in handcuffs, his expensive suit looking suddenly inappropriate, his confident demeanor replaced with shock. Timothy Garrett tried to maintain composure, his lawyer instincts kicking in, but the cameras caught his pale face and trembling hands. By noon, it was the lead story on every local news station. By evening, it had gone national. A prominent Seattle wealth manager and a high-profile divorce attorney have been arrested in connection with a sophisticated fraud scheme targeting wealthy individuals, the news anchor reported. Federal prosecutors allege David Preston and Timothy Garrett conspired to manipulate divorce proceedings, fabricate evidence, and defraud clients of millions of dollars over a span of more than 10 years. The coverage was extensive. Reporters interviewed some of the previous victims, people who'd lost homes, businesses, relationships because of Preston and Garrett's scheme. One woman broke down crying on camera, describing how they'd destroyed her 20-year marriage and bankrupted her. My case was mentioned specifically. Among the alleged victims is Benjamin Carter, a 73-year-old real estate developer whose divorce last year resulted in a $63 million settlement. Federal investigators now believe that divorce was orchestrated using fabricated evidence and fraudulent testimony. Diana wasn't arrested, but reporters camped outside the Madison Park house. I watched the aerial footage from news helicopters as she refused to comment, quickly getting into her Mercedes and driving away. My phone started ringing. Oliver first. Dad, I'm watching the news. Is this real? Every word, Oliver. But Mom said she showed us evidence. Those text messages were fabricated by Preston and Garrett, just like evidence in all their other cases. Silence. Then quietly, Dad, I'm so sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I know, son. We believed her. We believed everything. How could we have been so stupid? You weren't stupid. You were manipulated by professionals. Diana was manipulated too, in a different way. Sophia called next, crying before she even spoke. Daddy, I can't believe what we did to you. We abandoned you. We believed lies. Sophia, it's okay. It's not okay. We should have known better. We should have trusted you. I let her cry, let her process. Then I said, can I see you both? Maybe dinner this week? They both said yes. The media circus intensified over the next few days. Graham held a press conference presenting evidence of the scheme and announcing that several victims, including me, would be filing civil suits to recover damages. This case represents one of the most elaborate and callous frauds we've seen in domestic law, Graham declared. These men didn't just steal money. They destroyed families, reputations, and lives. And they did it systematically, repeatedly for years. Reporters shouted questions. One asked, what about Diana Carter? Will she face charges? Graham's response was careful. Mrs. Carter is currently classified as a witness, not a defendant. However, the investigation is ongoing. I met Oliver and Sophia for dinner at a quiet restaurant in Bellevue. When they arrived, both looked older, worn. Oliver hugged me tightly, and Sophia cried again. We sat in a corner booth, and for the first time in a year, we talked. Really talked. I don't even know where to start, Oliver said. Mom was so convincing. She showed us those texts arrests, told us stories about how you controlled her, how afraid she was, and we just believed her. She believed it too, I said. Preston manipulated her into thinking our marriage was abusive. He needed her to believe it for their plan to work. Sophia shook her head. But we're your children. We should have questioned it, should have asked for your side. You did ask. I just couldn't prove my innocence against fabricated evidence. Oliver looked miserable. The real estate investment that got bought out, that was you, wasn't it? And Sophia's contract? Yes, you saved us, Sophia said quietly. Even while we'd abandoned you, you were still protecting us. I reached across the table and took both their hands. That's what parents do, even when it hurts. We talked for 3 hours. They told me about the subtle ways Diana had poisoned their view of me, the guilt they felt now, the conversations they'd had with their mother since the arrests. She's in denial, Oliver said. She insists Preston loves her, that this is all a misunderstanding, that the arrest is politically motivated. She's not accepting reality. She will eventually, I said. Reality has a way of catching up with us all. The following week, Graham filed motions to vacate my divorce judgment based on fraud. Judge Norton, who'd presided over the original case, recused himself immediately, citing potential compromised judgment given the new evidence. A new judge was assigned, Judge Sarah Chen, known for her no-nonsense approach and hatred of legal manipulation. The hearing was scheduled for March. In the meantime, the criminal case against Preston and Garrett moved forward rapidly. Both men pleaded not guilty, but the evidence was overwhelming. Prosecutors had financial records, testimony from multiple victims, and electronic evidence of their conspiracy. Diana called me in February. It was awkward, painful. Ben, I need to talk to you. I'm listening. David says this is all a mistake, that they're targeting him because he's successful. But I've been reading the news coverage, talking to some of the other women. The other women. Diana, was our entire divorce a lie? Did you ever abuse me? The question hung in the air. I could have been cruel, could have made her suffer the way I'd suffered. But what would that accomplish? No, Diana, I never abused you. I loved you for 38 years. I wasn't perfect, but I never tried to control you or hurt you. She started crying. Then why did I believe it? Why did I think you were this monster? Because David Preston is very good at what he does. He identified vulnerabilities in our marriage, things every long marriage has, and twisted them into something sinister. He made you doubt your own memories, your own reality. I destroyed you, she whispered. I took everything. Yes, you did. Can you ever forgive me? I thought about Uncle William's letter, about the $89 million sitting in a forgotten account, about the life I'd rebuilt from nothing. I'm working on it, Diana, but it's going to take time. She hung up. I never heard from her directly again. The motion hearing in March was swift. Judge Chen reviewed the evidence of fraud, listened to testimony from the FBI agents who'd investigated Preston and Garrett, and examined the forensic reports on the fabricated text messages. Her ruling was unequivocal. The evidence presented demonstrates conclusively that the divorce proceedings between Benjamin and Diana Carter were based on fraudulent evidence and manipulated testimony. The original judgment is hereby vacated in its entirety. All property transfers are reversed. All financial settlements are nullified. She looked directly at Diana, who sat with a new attorney. Mrs. Carter, you have 30 days to vacate all properties and return all assets to their pre-divorce status. Failure to comply will result in contempt charges. Diana didn't react. She just stared straight ahead, looking empty. The criminal trial for Preston and Garrett began in May. It lasted 6 weeks. I attended every day, sitting in the back of the courtroom, watching justice slowly unfold. The evidence was damning. Prosecutors presented testimony from 9 victims whose lives had been destroyed. They showed financial records of payments between Preston and Garrett. They revealed the systematic nature of their fraud. Preston's defense tried to claim he was just doing his job as a financial advisor. Garrett's attorneys argued he was zealously representing his clients. Neither argument held up against the mountain of evidence. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Preston was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Garrett got 12. Both were ordered to pay restitution totaling $97 million to their various victims. My portion of the restitution was approximately $11 million, compensation for legal fees, emotional damages, and lost business opportunities. I didn't need it, not with Uncle William's account, but I accepted it anyway and donated every penny to organizations that helped people going through difficult divorces. By June, I had all 3 properties back: the Madison Park house, the Whidbey cabin, the Napa vacation home. I had the cars, the bank accounts, everything, but I didn't move back into the Madison Park house. Instead, I sold it. The memories there were poisoned, and I had no desire to reclaim them. I bought a smaller but beautiful home in North Seattle, with a view of the mountains and a garden where I could grow tomatoes. I kept the Whidbey cabin for weekends. The Napa property I gave to Oliver and Sophia jointly, a place for them to rebuild their own family memories. The old Ford pickup went to a charity that helped homeless veterans get transportation for job interviews. I bought a modest SUV, nothing flashy. Carter and Associates was gone, but I didn't rebuild it. Instead, I created something new. The William Carter Foundation focused on helping people recover from financial fraud and legal abuse. The foundation was funded by Uncle William's account, specifically $20 million transferred for operations and grants. The remaining $69 million stayed where Uncle William had put it, generating interest, waiting for whenever I or my family might truly need it. Oliver and Sophia were deeply involved in the foundation. Oliver used his legal expertise to help victims navigate the system. Sophia applied her analytical skills to identifying systemic problems in divorce law. We had dinner together every Sunday, slowly rebuilding what had been broken. Diana moved into a small condo in West Seattle, paid for by her half of our legitimately divided assets once the divorce was properly refiled and settled fairly. She and I spoke occasionally, brief, polite conversations about logistics or shared history. She never fully recovered from the revelation that Preston had manipulated her. The last I heard, she was in therapy, trying to understand how she'd been so thoroughly deceived. I felt sympathy for her. Not forgiveness exactly, but sympathy. She'd been a victim too, just a different kind. One evening in July, a year after I'd discovered Uncle William's account, I stood on the deck of my new home, watching the sunset paint the Cascade Mountains in shades of orange and pink. Oliver and Sophia were inside, preparing dinner. Their laughter drifted through the open door. For the first time in 2 years, I felt something like peace. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Mr. Carter? This is Judge Sarah Chen. I hope I'm not interrupting. I was surprised. Judges rarely call directly. Not at all, Your Honor. What can I do for you? I wanted to let you know I've been following what you've done with the William Carter Foundation, the work you're doing to help fraud victims. It's remarkable. Thank you. It seems like the right use of resources. There was a pause. Mr. Carter, I've been a judge for 23 years. I've seen a lot of people go through what you went through. Most come out angry, bitter, bent on revenge. But you came out graceful. You helped your children even when they'd abandoned you. You showed compassion to your ex-wife even after what she did. And now you're using your resources to help others. I just wanted to tell you that's rare. That's special. I didn't know what to say. Anyway, Judge Chen continued, I won't keep you. Enjoy your evening, Mr. Carter. She hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, thinking about her words. Had I shown grace? I didn't feel particularly graceful. I felt like someone who'd stumbled through darkness and accidentally found light. But maybe that's what grace is. Not perfection, but persistence. Not strength, but the willingness to keep going even when everything falls apart. Oliver came to the door. Dad, dinner's ready. I smiled. Coming. 2 years after the divorce was vacated, I was sitting in the foundation's office in downtown Seattle when Marcus Webb called. You're not going to believe this, he said, his voice excited. I was doing some background work on a different case, and I stumbled across something about David Preston. What is it? He had a fourth bank account, one nobody knew about, hidden offshore, and before he got arrested, he transferred a significant amount to it. Money he'd skimmed from various clients over the years. How much? $14 million. The feds just found it. It's all getting seized and distributed to Preston's victims. I did the mental math. Marcus, that's more than enough to make all his victims whole. Exactly. Every person he defrauded is going to get full restitution plus interest. Your share alone would be another $4 million. I thought about it. $4 million on top of the 11 I'd already received as restitution. Money I absolutely didn't need. Marcus, can you do me a favor? Name it. Contact the other victims. Tell them I'm declining my portion. They can divide it among themselves. Ben, that's a lot of money to just give away. I know, but I don't need it. And some of those people lost everything. Let them have it. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You're a better man than most, Ben Carter. After I hung up, I sat thinking about Uncle William. He'd saved $127.50 in 1958, the equivalent of about $1,400 today, and turned it into $89 million over 65 years. But the real inheritance wasn't the money. It was the lesson that true wealth isn't what you accumulate, but what you do with it. That the measure of a man isn't what he owns, but how he treats people when he has nothing left to lose. Uncle William had understood that, and now, finally, so did I. The foundation grew. We helped hundreds of people over the next few years. Some were fraud victims like me. Others were people navigating complicated divorces, facing legal manipulation, struggling against systems that seemed designed to destroy them. We provided legal assistance, financial counseling, and emotional support. We advocated for changes in divorce law, pushing for stricter penalties for attorneys who fabricated evidence. Oliver became the foundation's legal director. Sophia managed the environmental and community initiatives. They poured themselves into the work, perhaps as a way to atone for their earlier abandonment, perhaps simply because they'd found purpose in helping others. I spent my time meeting with people who'd lost everything, listening to their stories, offering encouragement, reminding them that hitting rock bottom wasn't the end of their story. I was right where you are, I'd tell them. I lost my marriage, my homes, my children's respect, my reputation. I was 73 years old, living in a hotel room, wondering if it was even worth continuing. What changed? They'd ask. I found out I had resources I didn't know existed. But more importantly, I found out that my value wasn't determined by what I owned or what people thought of me. My value was determined by who I chose to be in the darkest moment. Some understood. Others were still too deep in their pain. That was okay. Healing takes time. In 2028, 5 years years after the initial divorce, Judge Harold Norton, the judge who'd originally ruled in Diana's favor, was investigated for misconduct. It turned out he'd been receiving payments from Timothy Garrett for years, not for specific case outcomes, but for general consulting services that created a conflict of interest. Norton was forced to resign. Several of his other rulings came under scrutiny. The legal community was shaken. I felt no satisfaction from his downfall, just sadness that corruption had permeated so deeply into a system that was supposed to deliver justice. Oliver called me when the news broke. Dad, if Norton had been honest, if he hadn't been compromised, would our family have fallen apart? Maybe not in the same way, I said, but Preston and Garrett were skilled manipulators. They would have found another judge, another angle. What happened to us wasn't just about one corrupt official. It was about a systemic vulnerability that predators learned to exploit. That's what we're fighting against, isn't it? At the foundation, yes, we can't fix everything, but we can help people navigate the system, and slowly, piece by piece, we can change it. Diana came to see me in 2029. It was unexpected. She called and asked if we could meet for coffee. I suggested a quiet cafe near Green Lake. She looked older, worn by the years and the weight of what she'd done, but there was something else in her expression too. Clarity. Ben, I've been in therapy for 5 years, she said after we'd ordered, trying to understand how I let Preston manipulate me, how I betrayed you and our children. Diana, please, let me finish. I need to say this. She took a breath. I was unhappy, not because you were abusive, but because I'd lost myself somewhere in our 38 years together. I'd stopped pursuing my own interests, stopped developing my own identity, and Preston sensed that vulnerability. He didn't create my unhappiness, he exploited it. I nodded, understanding. I'm not making excuses, she continued. What I did was unforgivable, but I wanted you to know that I finally understand what happened, and I'm sorry, truly, deeply sorry. I appreciate that, Diana. I also wanted to tell you, she paused, collecting herself, what you've done with the foundation, the way you've helped people, the grace you've shown even to me. It's extraordinary. You're a better person than I gave you credit for during our marriage, better than I deserved. We talked for 2 hours, not about reconciliation, that ship had sailed and sunk long ago, but about understanding, about how two people who once loved each other deeply could end up destroying each other, and how maybe they could find their way to a place of mutual respect. When we parted, she hugged me. Thank you for letting me apologize, and thank you for forgiving me, even if you haven't said the words. I watched her walk away and realized she was right. Somewhere along the way, without even noticing, I had forgiven her. Not because she deserved it, but because I needed it. In 2030, I turned 80 years old. Oliver and Sophia threw me a birthday party at the Whidbey Island cabin. Nothing fancy, just family and a few close friends who'd stuck by me through everything. We stood on the deck overlooking the water as the sun set, and Oliver gave a toast. To my father, he said, his voice emotional, who taught us the real meaning of strength. Not the strength to build an empire, though he did that. Not the strength to accumulate wealth, though he had that. But the strength to lose everything and still choose kindness. The strength to be betrayed and still choose forgiveness. The strength to be abandoned and still choose love. He raised his glass. Dad, you are the best man I know. Happy birthday. Everyone drank. I stood there overwhelmed, looking at the faces around me. Sophia and her husband, Oliver and his wife, holding their newborn daughter, my first grandchild, Marcus Webb, who'd become a true friend over the years, Graham Sutherland, even Judge Sarah Chen, who'd become a supporter of the foundation's work. My life looked nothing like I'd imagined it would when I turned 80. The marriage was gone. The business was gone. Most of the wealth I'd built was redistributed or invested in helping others. But I had my children back. I had my integrity. I had purpose. And I had a secret that only Oliver and Sophia knew, the full truth about Uncle William's account. I'd told them one evening, years after everything had settled, showing them the original ledger and the letter. $89 million, Oliver had breathed, just sitting there all along. The money saved me, I'd explained, but not because I spent it, because it gave me options, because it let me help you two without you knowing, because it let me build the foundation. Uncle William understood something important. The most powerful wealth is the wealth no one knows you have. What will happen to it? Sophia had asked. After you're gone? I'd smiled. It's already in a trust. When I die, it goes to the foundation. The William Carter Foundation will continue helping people long after I'm dust. That's Uncle William's real legacy. Not the money, but the good it does. Now, standing on that deck at 80 years old, surrounded by people I loved, I felt complete. Marcus approached me as the party was winding down. Ben, can I ask you something? Of course. When you found that account, when you realized you had all that money, didn't you want revenge? Didn't you want to flaunt it? To show Diana and everyone who'd abandoned you that they'd made a mistake? I thought about it. For about 5 minutes, yes. But then I realized something. If I'd revealed the money immediately, if I'd used it to fight back, I'd just be proving that Diana and Preston were right about me, that I was all about wealth and power. So instead you hid it. I protected it, and I used it wisely. I helped my children when they needed it. I built something that would outlast me. I proved that my value had nothing to do with my bank account. Marcus nodded slowly. You're one of the wisest men I've ever met, Ben Carter. I laughed. I'm just an old man who got lucky and found wisdom in the wreckage. The party ended around midnight. Everyone left except except Oliver and Sophia, who helped me clean up. As we washed dishes, Sophia asked, "Dad, do you have any regrets?" I thought about everything. The marriage, the betrayal, the divorce, the years of rebuilding. "Only one," I said finally. "What is it?" "I regret that it took losing everything to understand what truly mattered. I wish I'd learned that lesson when I still had time to apply it to my marriage with your mother." "Would it have changed anything?" Oliver asked. "Maybe, maybe not. But at least I would have tried." We finished cleaning in comfortable silence. When they left, I stood alone in the cabin looking at the moonlight on the water. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mr. Carter, this is Jennifer Torres. The foundation helped me last year when I was going through my divorce. I just wanted to let you know I got full custody of my kids today, and the judge ruled in my favor on everything. Thank you for helping me fight. Thank you for giving me hope when I had none." I smiled and texted back, "That's wonderful news, Jennifer. You did the hard work. I just helped you see you were strong enough to do it." Messages like that came regularly now. People the foundation had helped. People who'd rebuilt their lives. People who'd found hope in their darkest moments. Each message reminded me why Uncle William had left that account, why he'd written that letter, why he'd trusted that I'd use the inheritance wisely. I walked out onto the deck one last time, looking at the stars. Somewhere up there, I like to imagine Uncle William was smiling. "I hope I made you proud," I whispered to the night. The waves lapped against the shore, and for a moment I could almost hear his voice. "You did good, Benjamin. You did real good." Benjamin Carter died peacefully in his sleep at age 86, surrounded by his children and grandchildren. The Seattle Times ran a lengthy obituary celebrating his business achievements, but spending more time discussing his philanthropic work through the William Carter Foundation. The foundation continues to this day, now run by Oliver and Sophia Carter. It has helped thousands of people navigate difficult divorces, recover from financial fraud, and rebuild their lives after legal manipulation. The original $89 million from Uncle William's account, after years of careful investment and growth, now exceeds $140 million, all dedicated to helping people who've hit rock bottom find their way back up. Diana Carter attended Benjamin's funeral, standing in the back, quietly crying. She never remarried. She spent her later years volunteering with domestic abuse survivors, real victims, not manufactured ones, perhaps trying to atone for her role in destroying an innocent man's reputation. David Preston served his full 15-year sentence. Upon release, he found work as a parking lot attendant, his financial licenses permanently revoked. He lives in a studio apartment in Spokane, far from the luxury he once enjoyed. Timothy Garrett died of a heart attack 4 years into his sentence, his legal legacy destroyed, his name synonymous with corruption. Oliver Carter eventually became a judge himself, committed to ensuring the legal system serves justice rather than manipulation. He framed his grandfather William's letter and kept it in his chambers as a daily reminder of what real wisdom looks like. Sophia Carter took over as executive director of the William Carter Foundation, expanding its reach to support environmental justice causes as well, honoring her father's belief that helping people and protecting the planet were fundamentally connected. And in a small, quiet corner of a cemetery overlooking Puget Sound, 3 graves sit side by side. William Carter, who planted a seed, Benjamin Carter, who nurtured it, and a space reserved for future generations who will continue the legacy. The inscription on Benjamin's headstone, chosen by his children, reads simply, "He lost everything and gained what mattered most."